On February 20th, 1943, on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, a cacophony of shouts pierced the morning air. As dawn broke, a wave of approximately 800 Japanese soldiers surged through the thick, tangled jungle, initiating a final, desperate banzai assault. Sergeant James McKinley firmly grasped his standard-issue M1 Garand rifle, his eyes fixed on the approaching enemy ranks. The distance closed rapidly, 50 yards, 40, then 30. The rifle, a dominant force on the battlefields of Europe, suddenly felt inadequate, its reloading process too slow and its effective range too limited for the close-quarters combat that was about to unfold. Every Marine was acutely aware of the grim mathematics of a banzai charge. These attacks moved with terrifying speed, roughly 10 miles per hour, and once the enemy breached the defensive line, survival hinged more on sheer luck than on skill or tactical prowess. However, on this particular morning, McKinley's hands were not wrapped around his Garand. Instead, slung across his back was a weapon that the Marine Corps had almost entirely dismissed. A World War I-era trench gun, deemed hopelessly obsolete for modern warfare by military experts. This 12-gauge pump-action shotgun had been largely absent from serious combat since the brutal trench warfare of France, a quarter of a century prior. As the first Japanese soldiers crashed through the final barrier of vegetation, McKinley raised this forgotten relic of the Great War. The events that followed would compel the Marine Corps to fundamentally rethink its jungle warfare doctrine. Since the moment it had been thrust into his hands 3 weeks earlier, McKinley had harbored deep reservations about the trench gun. After months of relying on the precision and range of the M1 Garand, the weapon felt alien and unwieldy. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson had made the decision to distribute the shotguns after carefully analyzing casualty reports from previous banzai encounters. Yet McKinley was not alone in his skepticism. Compared to the smooth and efficient operation of their rifles, the pump-action mechanism seemed cumbersome and slow. Moreover, the limited ammunition capacity, a mere 5 shells compared to the Garand's 8-round clip, felt like a significant reduction in firepower, a step backward in their ability to effectively engage the enemy. The morning of February 20th began much like any other on Guadalcanal. McKinley's squad had established a defensive perimeter along a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley, densely packed with mahogany trees and a thick undergrowth of vegetation. The oppressive humidity hung heavy in the air, like a damp blanket, and the familiar sounds of the jungle, the chattering of birds, the rustling of leaves, the distant rumble of artillery, created a deceptive sense of normalcy. Private Harrison sat nearby, meticulously cleaning his assigned trench gun with the same level of attention and care that he typically devoted to his rifle. The 19-year-old from Ohio had adapted to the shotgun more quickly than most, but even he harbored doubts about whether 5 shells would be sufficient when the inevitable Japanese assault began. The first sign of impending trouble, as was often the case, was an unsettling silence. The birds ceased their singing. The insects went quiet. McKinley had learned to interpret these subtle cues during his 8 months in the Pacific, and he immediately signaled his men to prepare for contact. Corporal Daniels, positioned 20 yards to the left, raised his hand in acknowledgement and chambered a round in his trench gun. In the sudden stillness of the jungle, the metallic sound of the pump action seemed unnaturally loud, a stark reminder of the impending danger. Through his binoculars, McKinley detected movement in the tree line, approximately 400 yards down the slope. Individual figures emerged from the shadows. Japanese soldiers advancing with the disciplined precision that invariably preceded a banzai charge. He began to count them, 50, then 70, then over 100. The enemy formation stretched across a front of nearly 200 yards, significantly wider than any charge his squad had previously encountered. Each soldier carried the traditional Arisaka rifle, equipped with a fixed bayonet, and their synchronized movements suggested that this would be one of the highly coordinated assaults that had successfully breached American lines throughout the Solomon Islands campaign. McKinley's radio crackled with urgent reports from adjacent positions. Similar formations were massing along the entire ridgeline, a coordinated attack involving at least 800 Japanese soldiers. The sheer numbers alone caused his stomach to clench with anxiety. His 12-man squad would be facing approximately 60 charging enemies, odds that would have been manageable with clear fields of fire and an adequate supply of ammunition. However, the dense jungle vegetation severely limited visibility to less than 50 yards in most directions, and the trench guns carried only 25 rounds per man, compared to the 80 rounds typically issued for the M1 rifles. The charge commenced with the traditional battle cry that had instilled fear in American forces since the attack on Pearl Harbor. 800 voices screaming in unison created a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. Through his field glasses, McKinley watched as the Japanese formation surged forward, maintaining the practiced pace that would bring them within effective range in less than 2 minutes. The enemy soldiers advanced in loose formations, weaving between the trees and utilizing the terrain to mass their approach. Their training was evident. They maintained spacing to prevent concentrated fire from disrupting their momentum, and they moved with the desperate energy of men who fully expected to die in the assault. As the charge closed the distance, Harrison called out range estimates. 300 yards and closing fast, Sergeant. Despite his youth, the private's voice conveyed a steady professionalism, a testament to the rapid maturation that combat demanded. McKinley could now discern individual faces, young men not much older than Harrison, their expressions contorted with the fanatical determination that made banzai charges so effective against unprepared defenders. These were not merely desperate last stands. They were calculated tactical decisions, designed to exploit American weaknesses in close-quarters combat. At 200 yards, McKinley issued the order to prepare for engagement. His men shifted into position behind fallen logs and natural depressions, each Marine conducting a final check of his weapon. Compared to the approaching wave of bayonets and screaming voices, the trench guns felt woefully inadequate. McKinley had witnessed banzai charges before, and he knew that the critical moment would arrive when the enemy reached the 50-yard mark. At that distance, rifle accuracy became virtually irrelevant, and survival depended on rapid, devastating firepower. Stay with us to watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Daniels strategically situated himself at a naturally constricted area, where the landscape forced the oncoming enemy into a corridor less than 30 yards across. The seasoned corporal recognized the tactical edge this location provided, yet he was also acutely aware that focused enemy gunfire would quickly pinpoint him once the conflict began. His trench shotgun held 5 rounds, each packed with 9 pellets, totaling 45 projectiles set to disperse in a cone approximately 10 feet wide at short range. Suddenly, the mathematics of the impending clash seemed more promising than they had with his standard rifle. The assault drew closer, reaching 100 yards, and McKinley could discern individual voices amidst the collective shouts of the attackers. Japanese soldiers stumbled over roots and plowed through dense undergrowth, but their relentless forward drive remained unbroken. Some carried satchel charges, intended to obliterate American emplacements, while others brandished traditional swords alongside their rifles. The psychological impact was immediate and deliberate. Several of McKinley's newer Marines displayed overt signs of panic, their hands trembling as they clutched unfamiliar shotguns. At 75 yards, the enemy formation began to compress, as the jungle's terrain channeled them into predictable paths. McKinley realized that the thick vegetation, initially perceived as a disadvantage, was actually working to their benefit. The Japanese soldiers were constrained to advance along specific routes, thereby creating natural kill zones that his trench guns could effectively dominate. He promptly adjusted his positioning orders, tasking Harrison and 2 other Marines with covering the primary approach, while Daniels secured the secondary route. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please comment where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The final 50 yards elapsed in mere seconds. McKinley raised his trench gun and disengaged the safety, immediately noticing the difference in weight distribution compared to his rifle. The weapon that had seemed so archaic during training was about to face its ultimate test against an enemy tactic that had breached American defenses throughout the Pacific. All his knowledge of conventional warfare was about to prove inadequate, and his survival would hinge entirely on a forgotten relic from the trenches of France. The first shot shattered McKinley's preconceived notions about modern warfare. As the lead Japanese soldier emerged from the undergrowth at 40 yards, McKinley squeezed the trigger of his trench gun. The 12-gauge shell unleashed 9 lead pellets in a widening pattern that struck not only his intended target, but also 2 soldiers running alongside him. All 3 men collapsed instantly, their charge halted by a weapon McKinley had dismissed as obsolete only moments before. The pump-action mechanism cycled smoothly despite the humidity, loading a fresh shell faster than he could have reloaded his M1 Garand rifle. Harrison opened fire from his vantage point near the main trail, and the resulting sound was unlike anything the Marines had previously experienced in combat. The sharp crack of rifle fire was replaced by the deafening boom of shotguns, each blast reverberating through the jungle like artillery fire. The psychological effect on the charging Japanese soldiers was immediate and devastating. Men who had trained to withstand rifle wounds found themselves facing a barrage of scattered projectiles that rendered individual accuracy irrelevant. Harrison's second shot struck 4 soldiers in a tight cluster, the pellets spreading across a cone nearly 15 feet wide at a range of 30 yards. The jungle environment, which had been a source of frustration for American forces throughout the Pacific Campaign, suddenly became their greatest tactical asset. The dense vegetation that blocked rifle bullets at long range posed no obstacle to shotgun pellets at close quarters. Mahogany branches that deflected aimed shots merely dispersed the spreading patterns of buckshot, creating ricochet effects that struck Japanese soldiers from unexpected angles. McKinley watched in amazement as his third shot penetrated a screen of leaves and vines that would have completely stopped his rifle round, striking two enemies he could barely see through the foliage. Daniels, positioned at the secondary approach, where the terrain formed a natural funnel, experienced his first engagement when 6 Japanese soldiers rounded a cluster of fallen trees at 25 yards. The veteran corporal fired twice in rapid succession, his pump-action shotgun cycling with practiced precision. The 12 shells had been loaded with double buckshot, each pellet roughly the diameter of a .38 caliber bullet. At such close range, the effect was catastrophic. The narrow confines of the jungle trail concentrated his fire pattern, and all 6 attackers fell within seconds. The rapid pace of engagement fundamentally altered the nature of combat. McKinley's previous battles had involved careful aiming, breath control, and precise trigger squeeze at ranges exceeding 100 yards. The trench gun eliminated these requirements entirely. At distances under 50 yards, pointing became more important than aiming, and rapid fire mattered more than accuracy. His 4th shot was fired instinctively at a muzzle flash glimpsed through the dense undergrowth. The spreading pellets found their target despite vegetation that would have made rifle fire impossible. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson had insisted on distributing 25 shells per man, a decision that had seemed wasteful during the initial briefings. McKinley now understood the tactical reasoning behind it. Each shotgun shell contained multiple projectiles, effectively multiplying the firepower of every Marine. His 5-round magazine capacity translated to 45 individual projectiles, comparable to an entire 8-round rifle clip. The additional ammunition allowed for sustained engagement, without the careful conservation required for rifle cartridges. Harrison discovered another advantage during his 6th shot. A Japanese soldier had taken cover behind a tree trunk that would have provided complete protection from rifle fire. The spreading pattern of buckshot curved around the obstacle, striking the enemy from angles that direct fire could never achieve. The 19-year-old private began using this technique deliberately, firing at angles that sent pellets ricocheting through the jungle canopy to strike targets in seemingly impossible positions. In the harsh environment of the Solomon Islands, the humidity presented unexpected challenges and advantages for American weaponry. While the ubiquitous moisture often hindered the accuracy of rifles, requiring frequent cleaning, the trench shotguns displayed a surprising resilience. The very atmospheric conditions that caused rifle bullets to scatter at longer distances had a negligible effect on the buckshot patterns unleashed at close range. Private McKinley, drawing from prior experiences, observed that his shotgun operated with greater dependability than his M1 Garand had in similar conditions during previous patrols. Corporal Daniels, a seasoned Marine, had dedicated the preceding 3 weeks to mastering the pump-action mechanism of his shotgun. Through rigorous training, he had ingrained the movements into his muscle memory, enabling him to cycle shells instinctively. This allowed him to maintain a continuous stream of fire while maneuvering between positions. Daniels estimated that his sustained rate of fire approached 3 rounds per minute, a pace that surpassed bolt-action rifles and rivaled semi-automatic weapons. More importantly, each round delivered a devastating impact, within the confined spaces where jungle combat unfolded. The distinctive sound signature of the shotguns introduced an element of confusion among the Japanese forces, who were accustomed to the familiar reports of American rifles. McKinley could discern shouted commands within the enemy ranks, but the orders seemed disjointed and uncertain. The attacking soldiers had undergone extensive training to recognize and respond to the sound of M1 gunfire, using the distinctive ejection of the 8-round clip as a cue to time their advances. The continuous boom of the shotguns disrupted their tactical timing and eradicated the audio cues that had previously coordinated their assaults. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. By his 10th shot, McKinley began to realize that the weapon he had initially received with reluctance was revolutionizing close-quarters combat. The trench gun's effectiveness in the jungle surpassed even the most optimistic predictions made by Marine Corps analysts. The dense vegetation, which restricted rifle engagement ranges to under 50 yards, created ideal conditions for the deployment of shotguns. The weapon that had seemed primitive in comparison to modern rifles was, in reality, perfectly suited for the environment where American forces were engaged in some of their most desperate battles. Private Harrison, having expended 15 rounds, discovered that reloading under the stress of combat required different techniques than those used for rifle ammunition. Shotgun shells were larger and more cumbersome to handle, but the process was ultimately simpler than managing 8-round clips. Harrison developed a rhythmic technique of firing 3 shots, quickly topping off 2 shells, and then continuing the engagement. This method ensured a continuous stream of firepower, while preventing his weapon from running completely empty during critical moments. The banzai charge, which had seemed so overwhelming at 400 yards, was now disintegrating under the concentrated fire of the shotguns. Individual Japanese soldiers continued to advance with unwavering determination, but their coordinated formation had dissolved into scattered groups, struggling through increasingly lethal terrain. McKinley's squad had come to the realization that conventional wisdom about infantry weapons was flawed. In the dense jungles of the Pacific, the seemingly outdated trench gun had become the most effective tool for halting enemy assaults, transforming desperate last stands into controlled defensive victories. The aftermath of the engagement on February 20th provided Lieutenant Colonel Pearson with data that challenged every preconceived notion about the effectiveness of infantry weapons in jungle warfare. McKinley's after-action report documented 23 confirmed enemy casualties inflicted by a 12-man squad armed with trench guns compared to the average banzai charge results of 4 to 6 casualties per squad using standard rifles. The engagement lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds from initial contact to enemy withdrawal, significantly shorter than the typical 8 to 12-minute firefights associated with rifle-based defenses. Most remarkably, the Marine casualties totaled 0 dead and 2 lightly wounded, a complete reversal of the casualty ratios that had plagued American forces throughout the Solomon Islands campaign. Pearson immediately grasped the tactical significance of these numbers. Standard Marine doctrine dictated that rifle fire should commence at the maximum effective range, typically 200 to 300 yards in open terrain. However, jungle conditions reduced this range to 50 yards or less, creating engagement windows of only 15 to 20 seconds before enemy forces reached American positions. The M1 Garand's 8-round capacity allowed experienced Marines to fire 6 to 7 aimed shots during this critical period, assuming optimal conditions and no mechanical malfunctions. McKinley's squad had demonstrated that the trench guns could deliver 20 to 25 effective shots per man during the same time frame, with each shot producing multiple projectile impacts. The operational analysis extended beyond simple calculations of firepower. Pearson's staff reviewed ammunition consumption data from previous engagements, discovering that rifle-equipped squads typically expended 60 to 80 rounds per confirmed enemy casualty during banzai charge encounters. In stark contrast, McKinley's squad had achieved a ratio of 12 shotgun shells per casualty, with each shell containing 9 pellets. The effective ammunition-to-target ratio represented a dramatic improvement, particularly significant given the logistical challenges of resupplying forward positions in the dense jungle terrain. Corporal Daniels provided crucial insights into the weapon's performance under the duress of combat. His experience with both rifles and shotguns during the same engagement allowed for a direct comparison of ergonomic factors. The pump action mechanism proved more intuitive under extreme pressure than the manipulation of bolts or the changing of clips. Daniels reported that his muscle memory adapted to the shotgun's operation within the first 10 rounds, whereas rifle proficiency had required months of training to achieve similar levels of reliability. The weapon's operation remained consistent, despite the adrenaline surge and the degradation of fine motor skills that accompanied close combat. Reports originating from the conflict highlighted additional merits of utilizing shotguns. Soldiers from the Japanese Army, even when struck by rifle bullets, often remained capable of pressing their attack for a short duration, frequently long enough to reach American lines with bayonets or explosive charges. However, individuals wounded by shotgun blasts exhibited immediate incapacitation in a remarkable 93% of documented instances. Navy medical personnel attributed this phenomenon to the multiple wound channels created by the scattered pellets, which disrupted the nervous system with greater efficacy than single bullet wounds. Harrison's meticulous account of reloading procedures under fire offered crucial tactical insights that subsequently influenced training protocols. The Marine successfully reloaded his shotgun 7 times during the engagement, maintaining a continuous barrage by coordinating his ammunition changes with nearby comrades. His method of loading 2 shells after every 3rd shot prevented the weapon from being completely empty, ensuring a sustained rate of fire. This approach proved superior to the conventional practice of emptying the weapon before reloading, especially when confronting massed infantry assaults that provided no natural lulls in combat. The psychological impact of shotgun fire unexpectedly emerged as a force multiplier during the post-battle interrogation of captured Japanese soldiers. The prisoners disclosed that the distinctive sound of the pump-action cycling instilled panic within their ranks, as the weapon was associated with American law enforcement and gangster films that had gained popularity in Japan before the war. The deafening blast of 12-gauge shells at close range produced auditory shockwaves that disrupted communication and coordination within the attacking formations. Several prisoners recounted the experience as encountering thunder guns that seemed to fire continuously without the need to reload. Pearson's analysis of the terrain revealed the reasons behind the trench gun's remarkable effectiveness in the Pacific theater. Stay with us. We're about to delve even deeper into the trench gun's impact on the Pacific front. Don't miss the rest of this compelling analysis. And if you're enjoying this content, we'd be incredibly grateful for a like and a subscription. The dense vegetation prevalent in most combat zones created natural funnels, concentrating attacking forces into predictable pathways. Shotgun patterns, which expanded to roughly 10 feet in diameter at 30 yards, perfectly matched these terrain-defined kill zones. Contrary to conventional wisdom, which favored the accuracy and range of rifles, the weapon's effectiveness actually increased in jungle conditions. Unknowingly, jungle warfare had provided the ideal setting for shotgun employment, despite the weapon's original design for trench warfare 25 years prior. The maintenance demands of trench guns in tropical environments presented surprises for both Marines and their equipment specialists. While rifle barrels required daily cleaning to maintain accuracy, shotgun performance remained consistent, despite the accumulation of fouling. The larger bore diameter and lower pressures generated by 12-gauge ammunition proved more tolerant of humidity, mud, and debris that plagued smaller caliber weapons. Harrison reported that his weapon functioned reliably throughout the engagement, even after being submerged in muddy water during the initial positioning phase. The supply chain implications of widespread trench gun adoption presented both challenges and opportunities. 12-gauge ammunition was considerably heavier than rifle cartridges, reducing the number of rounds each Marine could carry. However, the improved effectiveness per round partially mitigated this disadvantage. Pearson calculated that a Marine carrying 25 shotgun shells possessed equivalent firepower to a rifleman with 40 to 50 rounds, while maintaining roughly the same total ammunition load weight. The reduced ammunition requirements also simplified logistics for units operating far from established supply lines. Training protocols required a fundamental overhaul to incorporate shotgun tactics into Marine doctrine. Traditional marksmanship emphasized precision, breath control, and single-shot accuracy at extended ranges. Shotgun employment demanded rapid target acquisition, instinctive pointing, and a sustained rate of fire at close quarters. Daniels volunteered to develop training programs that could prepare Marines for this tactical shift within the limited time frames available between combat operations. Intelligence gleaned from captured documents revealed that Japanese commanders had begun adapting their banzai charge tactics to counter American rifle fire. Enemy formations had learned to exploit the 8-round capacity limitation of M1 rifles, timing their final assaults to coincide with reloading cycles. The continuous fire capability of pump-action shotguns negated this tactical advantage, forcing Japanese forces to develop entirely new approaches to close assault operations. By March 1st, Pearson had amassed sufficient data to recommend the immediate expansion of trench gun distribution throughout the 1st Marine Division. His report to higher headquarters included detailed analyses of ammunition consumption, improvements in casualty ratios, and tactical employment recommendations. The weapon that military planners had deemed obsolete for modern warfare had proven itself the most effective tool for halting enemy charges in jungle conditions, fundamentally shifting the tactical balance in favor of defending American forces. The monsoon rains that began on March 15th exposed the first significant weakness in the trench gun's jungle performance. McKinley discovered this during a routine patrol when his weapon failed to eject a spent shell, leaving him temporarily vulnerable. While Japanese snipers targeted his position, the pump-action mechanism that had functioned flawlessly during the February engagement now struggled against the constant moisture that penetrated every seal and crevice. Within 48 hours of continuous rainfall, half the shotguns in his squad were experiencing intermittent malfunctions that threatened to negate their tactical advantage. Harrison found himself troubleshooting mechanical failures that had never surfaced during training exercises. The steel components of the pump mechanism began exhibiting signs of corrosion despite regular cleaning, and the wooden stock started swelling from moisture absorption. His weapon jammed twice during a night ambush on March 18th, forcing him to switch to his backup sidearm while enemy forces advanced within grenade range. The reliability that had made the trench gun so effective was proving vulnerable to environmental conditions that exceeded the weapon's original design parameters. The effectiveness of the trench guns, initially celebrated for their brutal efficiency in close-quarters combat, was being severely undermined by unforeseen environmental factors and design limitations. The standard design parameters, adequate for temperate climates, proved wholly inadequate for the harsh realities of the Pacific theater. Corporal Daniels, a resourceful Marine, took the initiative to implement field modifications that, while technically violating established Marine Corps maintenance protocols, became essential for operational sustainability. Working with a meager assortment of tools and cannibalized parts from damaged weaponry, Daniels embarked on a mission to dissect shotguns, identifying the components most susceptible to the pervasive humidity. His analysis revealed that the extractor mechanism was the most vulnerable, followed by the trigger group assembly and the magazine tube spring. Counterintuitively, Daniels discovered that over-lubrication exacerbated the issues by attracting debris and sand, leading to clogs in the moving parts. The challenges were not limited to mechanical failures. Ammunition performance also suffered significantly. Shotgun shells stored in the tropical environment began to exhibit signs of deterioration within a mere 2 weeks of the monsoon season's commencement. The cardboard hulls, despite their wax coating, absorbed moisture, resulting in inconsistent chamber pressure and wildly erratic pellet patterns. McKinley's squad experienced 3 catastrophic shell failures during a single intense engagement. 1 round produced only a feeble report, and the pellets barely traveled 15 yards. These ammunition malfunctions occurred precisely when reliable firepower was most crucial for the Marines' survival. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson found himself in a tactical predicament that threatened to invalidate the entire trench gun program. Field reports pouring in from various units echoed similar reliability concerns, with malfunction rates soaring to 23% during extended operations in the incessant wet conditions. The weapon that had once revolutionized close-quarters combat was now proving unreliable at the very moments when Marines needed it most. Pearson's staff calculated that mechanical failures during encounters with the enemy had already resulted in 4 Marine casualties that might have been avoided with functioning weapons. The improvised solutions pioneered by experienced Marines like Daniels began to propagate through informal networks, bypassing official channels. The techniques for waterproofing the pump mechanisms involved materials never intended for military use, including beeswax sourced from local inhabitants and petroleum products diverted from vehicle maintenance supplies. While these makeshift solutions improved reliability, they introduced new problems related to weapon standardization and maintenance procedures. Each squad developed slightly divergent approaches to maintaining their shotguns, rendering centralized training and supply support increasingly challenging. McKinley's efforts to maintain his weapon according to the established official procedures proved woefully inadequate for the demanding jungle conditions. The standard cleaning kit, designed for rifle maintenance, lacked the appropriate tools for shotgun mechanisms, and the prescribed lubricants, rather than repelling moisture, seemed to attract it. His weapon required complete disassembly and cleaning after every patrol, a time-consuming process that left Marines vulnerable during periods when they should have been resting or preparing for impending operations. The maintenance burden was evolving into a significant tactical liability. Harrison devised a rotation system that ensured at least half of his squad's weapons remained functional at any given time. Marines would alternate between two shotguns, allowing one weapon to dry out while the other remained in service. This approach necessitated doubling the number of weapons carried by each unit, creating logistical challenges for patrols operating far from established bases. The added weight burden reduced ammunition capacity and mobility, partially negating the tactical advantages that had made trench guns so effective during initial engagements. The psychological impact of weapon malfunctions proved as significant as the mechanical problems themselves. Marines, who had grown confident in the stopping power of their shotguns, now grappled with the possibility of equipment failure during critical moments. McKinley observed heightened stress levels among his squad members, who began carrying additional backup weapons despite the added weight. The reliability issues were eroding the morale boost that had accompanied the trench gun's initial successes against banzai charges. Ammunition supply problems further exacerbated the mechanical difficulties confronting shotgun-equipped units. The specialized nature of 12-gauge military ammunition meant that resupply operations required different logistics procedures compared to standard rifle cartridges. When shipments were delayed or damaged by inclement weather, Marines found themselves rationing shells while enemy activity persisted at normal levels. McKinley's squad operated with reduced ammunition loads for 6 days during late March, forcing them to curtail engagement ranges and avoid patrols that might lead to prolonged firefights. Daniel's unofficial role as the unit's technical expert expanded as other squads sought solutions to similar problems. The seasoned corporal found himself conducting informal training sessions on field maintenance techniques, sharing knowledge that had never been formally documented in official manuals. His expertise became so invaluable that Lieutenant Colonel Pearson began consulting him directly on equipment decisions, bypassing normal channels to tap into practical knowledge gleaned through combat experience. The environmental challenges encountered by the trench guns underscored broader issues with equipment adaptation for operations in the Pacific Theater. Weapons designed for European conditions required extensive modification to function reliably in tropical climates. The humidity, extreme temperature fluctuations, and corrosive salt air created unforeseen problems during peacetime development and testing. McKinley's experience encapsulated the adaptation challenges facing all American forces operating in unfamiliar environments. By the end of March, field reports indicated that properly maintained trench guns retained substantial tactical advantages, despite their reliability issues. Units that successfully adapted their maintenance procedures continued to achieve superior results against Japanese charges compared to rifle-equipped forces. However, the weapon's effectiveness now depended heavily on the technical competence of individual Marines, rather than standardized procedures that could be universally applied. This resulted in performance disparities between different units based on the experience and resourcefulness of their personnel. The crisis compelled Marine Corps leadership to choose between abandoning a tactically superior weapon system or accepting the operational complications required to maintain it under combat conditions. Despite earlier misgivings, the combat shotgun found a niche in the Pacific theater, though its effectiveness depended heavily on the specific conditions of battle. McKinley's unit had showcased that trench guns, when wielded with proper support, could remain a potent force. However, such support demanded resources and specialized knowledge, not always readily available. The ultimate decision on whether this seemingly outdated weapon from the Great War would continue to serve American troops in the Pacific hinged on striking a balance between its battlefield impact and the practicalities of logistical support. The black volcanic sands of Iwo Jima presented a stark contrast to the jungles, essentially transforming the trench gun's role from a jungle warfare tool to an instrument of urban combat. As McKinley's squad moved across the gritty terrain, they advanced towards a network of Japanese bunkers that formed the island's core defenses. The familiar dense vegetation of previous Pacific campaigns was replaced by an otherworldly landscape of sulfur vents, jagged rock formations, and concrete fortifications that appeared to rise organically from the earth. The tactical advantages that made shotguns so valuable in the jungles now required a complete reassessment in this novel environment. The altered conditions became immediately apparent during the February 19, 1945 landing. Harrison struggled to maintain his weapon, as volcanic ash infiltrated every moving part, even with protective measures in place. The fine, abrasive particles proved more damaging than the humid jungle climate, working their way between components and forming a destructive paste when combined with lubricants. His first attempt to cycle the action after reaching the beach resulted in a grinding sound, signaling potential damage to the extractor. The very weapon that had endured months in tropical conditions was now being compromised by an environment for which no Marine had prepared. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson's assessment of the Japanese defenses revealed why trench guns might be even more crucial on Iwo Jima than they were in the jungle. The enemy had moved away from the banzai charges in favor of entrenched positions, funneling American advances through narrow corridors, barely wide enough for a single file of troops. These underground passages and reinforced bunkers created close-quarters engagement ranges of just 5 to 15 yards, distances where the shotgun's effectiveness would be maximized. The weapon, initially designed for the trench warfare of France, was about to encounter conditions strikingly similar to its original purpose. On March 2nd, Corporal Daniels led the first underground assault, his squad tasked with clearing a tunnel complex holding roughly 30 Japanese soldiers. The concrete passages, 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, made rifle maneuvering exceedingly difficult while favoring the compact nature of pump-action shotguns. Daniels carried 40 rounds of double-aught buckshot, specifically chosen for its close-quarters penetration capability. Each shell contained 12 pellets, capable of defeating light armor at point-blank range. The confined spaces of the tunnels amplified every aspect of shotgun use, both positive and negative. The deafening roar of 12-gauge shells in the concrete tunnels created intense acoustic shock waves, disorienting enemy soldiers and disrupting their coordination. Daniels noted that Japanese soldiers often became confused after the initial shotgun blast, giving American forces valuable seconds to advance. However, these same acoustic effects proved nearly unbearable for the attacking Marines, necessitating changes to standard assault tactics to prevent hearing damage among friendly forces. McKinley discovered that bunker clearing operations demanded a different ammunition selection than jungle encounters. Standard buckshot loads proved insufficient against the reinforced concrete and steel plate that Japanese engineers had integrated into their defenses. His squad began using specialized breaching rounds loaded with hardened steel projectiles designed to penetrate fortified materials. These shells reduced the effective pellet count from 9 to 6 per round, but provided the necessary penetration to engage enemies behind substantial cover. The psychological impact of shotgun use proved particularly effective in underground combat. Japanese defenders, trapped in bunkers, had no escape routes when American forces blocked tunnel entrances with concentrated fire. Harrison reported that enemy resistance often crumbled after the first few shotgun rounds, as defenders realized the futility of fighting in enclosed spaces against a weapon that made individual marksmanship irrelevant. The claustrophobic environment, initially favoring Japanese defensive tactics, became a killing zone dominated by American firepower. Ammunition consumption during bunker operations surpassed all previous estimates. McKinley's squad expended an average of 60 rounds per cleared position, compared to just 25 rounds per engagement during jungle operations. This increase reflected both the intensity of close-quarters combat and the need to maintain continuous suppressive fire while advancing through interconnected tunnel systems. Supply lines, already struggling to keep up with shotgun ammunition demand in the jungle, now faced even greater challenges in supporting bunker clearing operations. Daniels developed specialized tactics for navigating Japanese tunnel networks, incorporating lessons learned from both jungle warfare and urban combat principles. His approach emphasized rapid movement between firing positions, using shotgun patterns to clear multiple directions simultaneously. The experienced corporal discovered that ricocheting pellets in concrete passages often struck enemies who believed they had adequate cover, creating lethal effects that exceeded the weapon's intended capabilities. The medical challenges of treating shotgun wounds in underground environments complicated evacuation procedures and required adjustments to standard casualty care protocols. Navy corpsmen reported that blast effects in confined spaces created injuries unlike those seen in open terrain, with acoustic trauma becoming as significant as projectile wounds. The weapons that had proven so effective at stopping enemy attacks were also creating treatment challenges that strained medical resources. Harrison's frontline experiences in clearing heavily defended enemy emplacements brought to light the critical need for integrated weapon system tactics. Although shotguns were exceptionally effective in tight, confined spaces, their shortcomings became evident when engaging enemy positions at greater distances or attempting to breach robust fortifications. To address these limitations, Harrison's unit pioneered combined arms strategies, utilizing rifles for accurate long-range fire support and reserving shotguns for the final, decisive push. This approach leveraged the strengths of each weapon while mitigating their respective weaknesses. The unique volcanic terrain presented maintenance issues that, while distinct from those encountered in jungle warfare, were no less challenging. The presence of airborne sulfur compounds led to rapid corrosion of metallic weapon components, and abrasive volcanic ash accelerated the wear of moving parts. McKinley found it necessary to completely disassemble and clean his shotgun after each mission, with replacement parts becoming essential supply items that required urgent delivery from support units in the rear. Intelligence suggested that Japanese commanders were actively modifying their tunnel defense strategies to specifically counter the American use of shotguns. Enemy forces began constructing longer tunnels that exceeded the effective range of shotguns and incorporating obstacles designed to disrupt the shotgun's pellet spread. In response, American assault teams were compelled to devise new tactics to regain their dominance in subterranean combat. Please stay with us to see the end of this video. We would be grateful for your like and subscription. Leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. By March 15th, casualty data conclusively demonstrated that units equipped with shotguns experienced a notable reduction in casualties during bunker clearing operations when compared to units armed solely with rifles. McKinley's squad, for instance, participated in 14 separate tunnel assaults without suffering any fatalities and with only 3 minor injuries. These statistics stood in stark contrast to the typically high casualty rates associated with attacks on fortified positions. The weapon that had once revolutionized jungle warfare was now proving equally transformative in the urban combat landscape of Iwo Jima. The demonstrated success of trench guns and bunker operations resulted in a surge in demand that surpassed available supply allocations. As a result, Lieutenant Colonel Pearson was forced to ration these weapons among various units, each vying for priority allocation based on the importance of their respective missions. This once overlooked relic of World War I had unexpectedly become one of the most coveted weapons in the Pacific theater. Its effectiveness validated across a spectrum of combat environments that its original designers could never have foreseen.